Hello, welcome everyone. Can you see the slide? Yes, what does it say? Let me increase the font a bit for you. Can you read it now? Okay, welcome to my accessibility talk. So I want you to look at this and think, does it look familiar to you? Have you ever seen something like this in the app that you were using? Or maybe, yes? Okay. Maybe more important question would be, have you ever checked if this is happening in your app when you increase the font size? Have you ever checked? Okay, we will check it later together. But for now, let me properly introduce myself. I'm Anya. I'm an iOS engineer here in N26. I work in the Insights team. And the reason why I would like to talk about accessibility with you today is simply because I think we don't talk about it enough. We don't talk about it enough in our companies, in our teams, in our iOS community. So I just want to share my experience with you. I want to share with you how we included accessibility in my team's workflow. When do we talk about it? I want to share with you a really great accessibility testing checklist and what we have found and fixed so far, thanks to the fact that accessibility is in fact a part of the conversation when we develop new features. So let's start with some introduction. Accessibility is a very broad topic, so I'm sure I will not be able to cover all aspects of it today, and it can be considered from many different angles. Sorry, can you see? Okay. So the angle that I propose today is a great user experience. Of course, this can mean different things to different people, but I think this sentence in itself just shows that if we want to keep as many users happy as we can, we simply need to consider different needs that our users might have. And how can we do that? One answer that I thought about is allowing the user to receive the value, receive the information from our app in many different ways. So allow him to choose his preferred way. But the biggest benefit of giving this choice is that for some people, it enables them to use your app in the first place when their abilities do not allow them to consume content in the different ways. So not to be too ambiguous, I will give you an example of receiving information in two different ways. I will show you what my team is working on a daily basis and what kind of information we provide to our customers in N26 Insights dashboard. And the first way will be auditory, so we will hear a sound. When you hear it, just think if you can imagine what would be on the screen.
Insights. Heading. Main account. Personal. Balance. Button. 1 of 2. Selected. Expenses. Button. 2 of 2. Monthly budget. €630.70 left. 3 days to go. Edit the spending budget for the month. Button. Overview. Selected. Total spending in November is €1,200. Button. Categories. €720 in shopping, which is 60% of total spending. Button. €480 in subscriptions and donations, which is 40% of total spending. Button. Recurring payments. You have 0 upcoming payments, in total €0 left to pay. Button.
And here you see exactly the same information, but in a visual form. So the second way that you are probably more familiar with. So to close my introduction, I will give you my personal definition of accessibility, which is taking into consideration different abilities that people have and providing great user experience by empowering the user to consume content in the way that fits their needs and preferences best. And yes, to me personally, as an engineer, this means that I really bring value to the users. To me, as a person, it means that my work, the work that I do, is aligned with my values. And I was rehearsing this presentation yesterday, and someone asked me, like, what is my personal connection to this topic? How can I be more relatable to people today? And, you know, thinking of maybe some person in my life that I know that needs accessibility, and maybe because I mentioned that my mom is using a bit bigger font. But this is really not the reason. I don't have any sad story. I don't really know anyone who uses accessibility, but I still care deeply about this topic. I care about other people. I care that a blind person can use the app. I care about that colorblind person can use the app. I care about that the person who broke their arm and has a temporary disability can use the app, or a person who had an eye surgery can still have a great user experience regardless of what is happening in their life. Okay, so let's get into some knowledge sharing. I want to show you how we included accessibility into the Insights team process. And I will do it by answering 3 questions. And yeah, let's start with responsibility. Who do you think should bring up the topic of accessibility in a team? Any, sorry? Everybody. Do we have any different opinions? Product. Okay. So actually, everybody was also the thing that my first thought. But at the same time, if we say everyone, means no one will feel really responsible. So my new answer is you. You in a way that I think each team member can bring up proposals in the team. So why not about accessibility? Maybe there is this lack of awareness in the team, and you can be simply this first person who will bring up the topic. I want to make it clear that I don't mean that you have to do everything by yourself in the team. I'm just saying that each of us is already a great candidate to start the topic and see where this can lead you further. Okay, when to talk about this? What works in my team is to start the topic as early as possible, which means that we start in our refinement meeting. We get to see the design, we discuss the business logic of a new feature, and this is a good moment to start talking about accessibility on a high level. So when we see a design, we talk about how do we imagine the voiceover to read out the content. Should we group some elements? Should we hide some elements? Will the navigation be straightforward? And then the next meeting, when we discuss more the details of the implementation, is the kickoff meeting. And we always write down the requirements for accessibility in the Jira ticket, so that first of all, we are all on the same page on how this should work, and second, that we will test it later. And in this meeting, we also discuss, differences between different platforms on Android and web, and different possibilities. And we always finish our kickoff meeting with a set of questions to make sure that we didn't forget about anything. And one of those questions in our template is about accessibility details. This, having it in the template, ensures that no specific person has to bring it up every time. And it is simply considered as part of our process. And same as it's part of the work that we do, same as we discuss the backend contracts, same as we discuss feature flags or new endpoints. So in my team, refinement and kickoff are the two meetings that we use to talk about accessibility. Does it mean that this is the best way in the world to handle accessibility in your team? No. This is what works in my team. The best meeting that you can use to talk about accessibility is the one that is simply the most suitable for your team. I'm sharing this because this is what works for us. Maybe if you have a similar process and similar meetings, you could also try it out, but you can, of course, adjust and experiment and see where it fits in your workflow. And then let's go to the most common concerns that I hear about accessibility when this topic is brought up. I want to say also in the beginning that all of the concerns that I will show you now are completely valid. I also had them in the past, or I still have them. I am just showing you them so that we can consider them, of course, as a concern, but not as a blocker, not as a reason not to do accessibility. So first one, I'm not an expert on this topic, and a very similar one, I don't know how this should work. Very normal. Of course, those are the thoughts that come to your mind when you are not very familiar with the topic. But at the same time, let's think for a moment about the nature of our work. We are learning new things literally every day. Our work is professional Googler, I would say. So you can Google this as well. I have never heard anyone say, I cannot make an app in SwiftUI because it's something new, or this is something that I don't have experience with. You read the documentation, you watch the tutorial, and you make an app even if it's horrible, but you improve as you learn. So why should we consider accessibility in a different way? So I think it's fair to say that you don't have to be an expert to start, and it doesn't have to be perfect from the first try. We can improve as we learn. I have an example actually of a feature that was not accessible in Insights, simply because we didn't know how it should work. We didn't know how to make it accessible. But with time and with experience, we found a way, and I will show you how later. Okay, now we will address the second option. It should come from the product people. So I completely agree with this sentence. I cannot lie, because I think if it would be a product decision, it would be a requirement. Probably more processes would be set up around this topic. Maybe it would be easier, and it would be common across all the teams. But at the same time, for me, this is not a blocker, because considering accessibility and writing code and writing features that are accessible, to me, this is writing a code that is high quality, basically. Because if I test the dynamic type and it's like you saw in the second slide, then this is not good quality to me. So I don't need it for me to be a requirement from a product person or from management to still care about accessibility. Other teams are not doing it. I also heard this one before. So I really like this one because it shows us that we can consider exactly the same sentence in two different ways. Other teams are not doing it, so we also shouldn't. One way of seeing this. And other teams are not doing this, so we can set an example, we can share our knowledge, we can make it more common across the teams or across the company. Up to you how you decide to see it. And it will take too much time, also a valid concern. But I believe this only exists in the first place because we treat accessibility as an option and not a requirement. Of course, development takes time. This is normal. But very often when we consider accessibility early on, the implementation really doesn't take a lot of time. We get so much, let's say, for free from Apple, because they make accessibility easy to implement, that some things become obvious at some point. I see in my team, the more we are doing it, the more some things are very easy. We ask, should we hide, should we group? It's one line in the code, but makes a big difference. And really fixing bugs that are related to voiceover or are related to dynamic font size will take much more time than putting this one line in the code in the first place, know how it should work, know how you should test it. Okay, I talked a little bit about the process. Now I want to share with you a bit about the resources that make my and others people's life easier. I want to show you the accessibility testing checklist, which was created as an effort of a working group of people who care about accessibility in our company, led by our amazing quality engineer, Ksenia, who is also here. Shout out to Ksenia. And I want to say that following a checklist makes your life easier in this way, that you really don't need to remember all the aspects that you need to consider, that you need to test. If you are new to accessibility, it's also, in a way, you are just following an instruction on what to do. So let's look what's in there. Labels and descriptions, very basic, I would say, but very important thing to test. In this screenshot, we can see something that we do a lot in my team. So on the left side, you see that the voiceover would read separately 3 different labels. On the right side, it's one element. So we grouped 3 elements. What it means is that the voiceover user, instead of navigating 3 times, so swiping 3 times on the screen in order to hear the information, has to swipe just once. It's the same idea as, the least amount of clicks for the user to reach some place for a better user experience. It's exactly the same thing, but for the voiceover user. And something that we do a lot. And probably in this case, we would also hide the icon because the name of the person would be already read out by the voiceover. It doesn't bring any additional value. So we also don't want to confuse user with unnecessary description of the icon. Okay, before I discuss those things, I want to also say that, of course, not everything in this checklist will always be applicable to the feature that you are developing. But I think it's better to mark something as not applicable and to just skip in this one testing session than to remove it, because you might forget about it later when you have another feature where it is relevant. So we are testing elements that have a state. We are testing buttons, warnings, and links. Again, the point about hiding elements, we are discussing if there is something in the screen that the voiceover user should not see, that should not be read out. And we are testing navigation, if you can navigate to every element on the screen, if you can navigate back, forward, click, select, etc. And the text font size. Yeah, this one is very important to avoid this kind of monsters that we saw in the beginning. This is a checklist for manual testing. One way to automate this is that you can include dynamic type in your snapshot tests if you are using them. And yeah, and then we are testing if we respect the motion preferences of the user, and really that's all that is in this checklist. If any of the points that we are testing fails, we open a bug ticket like any other bug. Of course, it can be a matter of priority in the team, but of course, it's recommended to fix it as soon as possible. And so I'm not just showing you some checklist and, okay, I saw the checklist, bye. I find it very valuable, and I want to share this value with you. also this QR code will be available later if you don't manage to scan it now. But if you want to use the same checklist and test your app, test the accessibility in your app, I prepared the downloadable version. And yeah, it's available there. And I will show you some things that we have found, the issues that we have found in our Insights dashboard because of this checklist and because of the fact that we test accessibility regularly. So, do you see something weird on the left side? Okay, yes. This is our expenses overview chart. We realized that when we were increasing the font, the month labels were either cut or not visible at all, which makes them useless. So how we fixed this was by setting a maximum content size for the labels in the chart. I think this was the best that we could do without any design changes. Someone could argue, that we could maybe adapt the layout in a different way, but without changing the design, I think this was the best we could do so far. Then, next one. This is the example I talked about earlier of a feature that is not accessible, because how do you make a line chart accessible? I didn't know. So in the beginning, it was a conscious decision to hide this feature from VoiceOver, simply because we didn't know how to make it accessible, and we wanted to avoid this situation where the VoiceOver user would have to navigate through this chart, which has data points for every day for the last 6 months. So imagine the nightmare of a VoiceOver user who is going through 180 points in the chart. So at that point, the best thing that we could do was to hide it completely. But I don't want our users to lose this value that we are providing simply because we didn't know. So after some time, as I gained more experience and found out more things about accessibility, I came across audiographs. And they were introduced in WWDC in 2021. And this, to me, was super exciting discovery. And so I just watched the video and started implementing it in our balance evolution chart. So before I show you the video of how this would work, I will explain it to you so that you are not surprised with the sound. How audiograph works is that it plays the sound in the higher or lower pitch, depending on the value in the chart, so that the user can understand how the values are changing. So lower for lower values and higher for higher values. Let's hear it.
Current balance is €46,551.54. Audio graph available. The x-axis is months. The y-axis is balance. There is one data series. Describe chart. Play audio graph. Chart details. Balance evolution chart. Play audio graph. Current balance is 46.
And last example of something that gives me the most satisfaction, which is finding problems in components that are owned by another team. So here what we see on the screen is a 3-item container from our NXD, our design system library, in different forms, because we use it a lot in many different places in our app. I would even say that it's one of the mostly used components. But as you see, when we increase the font a bit, it either becomes a bit weird or not readable at all. So I raised this issue with the NXD team. And by raising this issue with NXD team, I mean I talked to Marco. who was presenting before. And to my surprise, this topic was prioritized quite fast. And literally a few days ago, Marco called me and showed me the fix that he is implementing for the new, our new design library in SwiftUI. And well, how this fix would work is basically the 3-item container. The name comes from the fact that you can have three elements in the container. And when we increase the font, at some point, we move the last element to the new line so that all elements would be visible and readable. And well, for me, this is even a bigger motivation to migrate more screens to our new design library. And the fact that this is, you know, an element in the design library has a huge benefit because all teams in N26 use the design library. So if this fix will work not just in the Insights dashboard, but in every other screen in our app that is using this component. Thanks, Marco, for taking care of this. So those were our findings. I hope you found it interesting to see what kind of issues we faced. Of course, there were more, but those were the most interesting. And now I would like to do some investigation together. So I would like to invite you to check if your favorite app is accessible. We can use dynamic type for this purpose. So how, if you want, of course, you can literally check right now on your phone. You can increase the font by going to the device settings, accessibility, display and text size, and larger text, and increase the font, and check your favorite app. Check if you can read what's in the app, if something is breaking, if the layout adapts. Let's see. I didn't know that we would have some Android users. Okay. If by any chance the app that you checked was N26 app and you have found some problems there, we are of course open to your feedback and we want to fix the issues. The app is not in the perfect state of accessibility, but we are now paying more attention to make it better. So one way to give us this feedback is either through the app in the way that you see on the screen, or you can come to me or to any other N26 engineer that is here today and we can talk about it. And we will also raise it in our teams. Okay, thank you for listening. If anything that I have said today encouraged you to look into accessibility a little bit more or include it in your team's workflow, I have also prepared some links to the conference talks that can expand your knowledge on accessibility. I found out that I cannot share the presentation, so I created the QR code again. The QR code contains both the accessibility testing checklist and those links to the accessibility talks. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please ask now.
Thank you for the talk. Do you monitor how many of your users use the accessibility features, or have you monitored it before implementing them?
Hello, okay. we don't monitor how many users use accessibility. It can be considered, I would say, an ethical issue. But what we definitely see that we have accessibility users because we receive feedback or people write reviews where they mention the accessibility issues. I think it's also not so easy to talk about the numbers when it comes to accessibility because it's maybe this is a misconception because I think when someone says accessibility, a lot of people, the first thought is blind people or deaf people, but the group is so much bigger because we are talking about permanent disabilities, temporary disabilities. As I said, maybe you break your arm or you cannot see but just for a month. So you cannot track this because you will not be able to see those changes in people. And we just want to accommodate and give people the flexibility to use the app in a way that they prefer at all times. So I think this is why it would be very hard to see how many people are actually making use of this. Also, like when I think of, I had this example that my mom is using a bigger font, but she's not, I wouldn't say that she is a disabled person. She just has a bit worse sight. And one other thing that is maybe worth considering when it comes to the logic, like how can we test that people are using accessibility in an app that is not fully accessible? If the app is not fully accessible, then people who need full support, it's not just preference, but a need, will probably not use it. So it has to be accessible in the first place, and maybe then you can check how many people are actually using it. But even with this not being the case, like we still have some issues that we are fixing. We know for sure that people are using accessibility features thanks to the fact that we have this feedback in reviews.
Thank you.
Yeah, Dmitry. Thank you for the presentation. And since you made great job with accessibility, but you mentioned good example for others, and probably the best examples would be some improvements in income. So to prove that we need accessibility, we should have something back. Maybe users spend more time in the app. Maybe we have more income. So like, yeah, it's a bit rough, but still like how to say that all these efforts, it's still like money. That's this all money worth to do this job. Have you any measurements
You mean
on
that
this
if we
side?
measure if we implement accessibility, if it brings money?
Yeah, like this.
Okay, so in this presentation, I'm sharing my personal views and why, I mean, of course, to me, as just one person in the company, I do it because it's important for different reasons than revenue. But I think also thinking logically, by allowing more users, by enabling more users to use your app, you kind of also open the possibility that you will have the customers that maybe they cannot use any other banking app because it's not accessible, but this one is. And this is how you, I think, gain also new customers, but we are not measuring it in any way right now.
Still a couple more questions. Have you tried to use it exactly without the screen? So you showed this voice interface. So like try to use it in the car, for example, like completely without the screen. Do you test it this way?
So I did it a few times out of curiosity and because I didn't know how it works. I also had to learn the navigation with VoiceOver is different than normal navigation. I didn't know the gestures that you use when you use VoiceOver. This is all something that also comes with you learning those things. So there were times that I literally closed my eyes or did this and I was navigating my phone and I was looking if I understand what is happening, if I can achieve some goal that I thought to myself, okay, can I send my sister 10 euros or not? And in this way, first of all, I knew what I don't know. So I didn't know that to to press a button with VoiceOver, you have to double tap, for example. Of course, it's the things that you learn, and then you can, when you are also testing, you maybe find some walls because you don't know how to do it. I Google, I check, and test. Yes, I tested without seeing the screen.
And last thing from my side, there is a lot of loudspeakers that have some special applications, like special way you can interact with them. Do you have any client from N26 for these devices? Because it seems like the same job, the same idea, same way. So it should also work for people with that couldn't interact with the screen. So they also should work also with loudspeakers. So do you have any solution for them?
You mean that the sound is?
Yeah, like Home Hub for Apple side, and also Google. I remember have something similar. Amazon, like Amazon Echo. So anything for them.
I don't know if VoiceOver, if you can.
I mean, it's still like the design approach from the design from applications. So how you interact with your system, and it should be somewhat similar. It's same issues, same like.
I mean, it works exactly the same, but you hear it from a different speaker. This is what you mean?
I mean, do you have the client?
Sorry?
Like any solution for these devices? Any, because they are extensible and.
I think I don't understand the
Okay.
question. Do we have any? Okay.
No, I think you mean HomePod and so on. I think we don't support these devices. We support only mobile apps. If the question was about that.
Yeah. How are you winning the fightings with guys from UI UX?
Can you repeat?
Yeah, I'm sorry. My question is, do you have some conflicts with a team of designers? Like these guys also like to introduce some new interesting design, and maybe it's not so convenient for accessibility features?
We are talking about accessibility, so our designer is also part of this conversation. We try to implement accessibility regardless of if we get accessibility requirements in the design. What happens is that now, as the accessibility is becoming more of a topic, we see, for example, that it's very much considered in the team that is creating the design library. And I think by doing this, we actually enable the whole company, because every team has to use the design library when we develop new features. When the designs in the design library are, when the accessibility is considered there, it means that it is also considered then in the implementation, as Marco said, and that we, as a feature team, get it for free from the design library.
Okay, thank you for your answer and your presentation.
Thanks.
It might be time for one more question, and you also.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. How long did it take you guys from user stories without the accessibility point to having it in the DNA of creating these stories?
I'm not sure, like I cannot tell you the number of days, but this process was definitely, there was an evolution. There was a time where we had to bring it up every time, or, you know, or one person was bringing it up. So when they were absent, no, others didn't. This is why at some point where we saw that this is a recurring thing, we didn't have the template from the beginning. It went into the template because we wanted to make it part of the process. So of course, it will probably still evolve to something more. Of course, we want to spread this knowledge, and I wish that the kind of process that we are following in my team would be also more common in our teams in our company. So yeah, it's hard to say. It starts, this first step is actually ask, okay, what do we do about accessibility? Did we think Should we give a different, should we request a translation for a new description for the voiceover? And as you start asking those questions, I think you start realizing that there are some patterns, there are things that are repeating every time in every feature. And this is when you have this chance of somehow automating it or putting it to a template so that it's just, you know, one of the other things that you need to consider. And yeah, I'm very curious to see where we will still evolve and where we will go from here. I think we have a lot of people right now in N26 who care deeply about accessibility, so I'm very excited to see where we will be in a few months.
Thank you.